Cheers.
I'm not done.
3 years ago, I was stood on the pitch at Charlton Athletics Ground, the Valley, as the football club that I'd supported my entire life, AFC Bournemouth, got promoted to the Premier League as Football League champions. There I was, stood on the pitch getting sprayed with champagne by footballers, which, for the record, sounds so much cooler than it actually is. In reality, it's icky and sticky and it buggers up your camera gear. And this was the greatest day in the history of my football club. I mean, football fans talk about the Premier League as being the dream. But for Bournemouth fans, our dream was to just still have a club the following season. So there I am, stood on the pitch, surrounded by celebrations. And yet, I was terrified. I was terrified because I knew that that summer, I was going to tell the club something that I thought would end my career in football. I've known that I was transgender since I was about 7 years old. I remember going on a family holiday to a holiday park in South Wales, piling out my mum and dad's Ford Anglia, which for those that are younger than me, which is pretty much everyone, was the car from Harry Potter. It was a real car, but it couldn't fly. So therefore, by the time my parents had driven all the way from Bournemouth up to South Wales, I think they were pretty sick of the two kids sat in the back of the car. Now, this was 1974, and good parenting was a bottle of Coke and a packet of crisps. So at the start of the holiday, my brother went off to play football, my parents went off to the bar, and I went off to meet the other kids. And these were kids that I'd never met before and that I would never meet again. And when we introduced themselves, I said, "Hi, my name's Jenny." And all week I was Jenny. Obviously, at 7 years old, I was quite cute. I'm still cute, but I got a little bit of that with it now. I'm going to do that again. There you go. But no one thought anything of it. At the end of the week, my parents came out of the bar. They had fed us in the meantime. It's not like they... My parents came out of the bar, and these kids went, "Bye, Jenny." And my parents looked at me kind of funny. And I went, "Weirdos, they've been doing that all week, absolutely no idea what they're talking about." But this was the mid-70s. We didn't have the internet. We had no knowledge. We had no LGBT role models, and we certainly didn't have trans role models. In fact, the only time you ever heard about trans people back then was when one of the Sunday tabloids was crucifying someone. And because of that isolation, because of that lack of knowledge, I felt like I was the only person in the world going through this. And because of that isolation, at the age of 12, I tried to take my life for the first time. Now, my youngest daughter's around about that age now, and to think that she could possibly be in that sort of pain would break my heart. At the age of 16, I joined the Royal Air Force. I was third generation Air Force. My granddad had been out in Burma during the war, and my dad had worked on Phantoms in Germany during the 70s. And I became a jet engine technician on a Tornado squadron. And one lovely August afternoon, when I was 18 years old, I was walking between hardened aircraft shelters, and I heard this bang. Immediately went to the source of the noise, and there'd been an explosion at one of the aircraft. And a colleague of mine who was 19 years old had lost his arm in this explosion. I was the first person there. I put a tourniquet on it, and I saved his life. But I was 18 years old. And despite that the Air Force and the military should have had like 100 years worth of knowledge of post-traumatic stress, by that point, the only way they could treat it was to actually immediately ship me out to Germany. I think what they thought was they're taking me away from the scene of the pain. But in reality, what they were doing was removing me from my support network. The only counseling I was offered was to go and see the Padre. And I'm not religious. The idea of talking to a priest about my mental health just wasn't going to work. So there I am. I'm 18 years old. I'm stationed in Germany. Still transgender, because it doesn't get better on its own. depressed, self-harming, suicidal, and using alcohol to try and master my pain. And effectively, that was my life for the next couple of decades. Around about 2000, I started to work out what my gender identity actually meant. I'd learned about people called transgender, and this knowledge had started to filter through to me. And I decided to start transitioning. Now, the world was a very, very different place back in 2000. Wherever I went, I would get abuse on the streets. Now I just get it on Twitter. That's technology for you. But I even got abused in my doctor's waiting room. My doctor's response was, well, you chose to do this, so you're going to have to get used to it, which, first of all, shows he knows nothing about being trans, because you certainly don't choose it. And secondly, that he had no empathy as a human being. And then my partner got pregnant. And the plan was that our child would have two mothers from the day they were born, which back in 2000 was unheard of, especially if one of them was trans. And on the day my son was born, he had a massive seizure. And as a result of this seizure, we nearly lost him. And he ended up disabled. And I remember holding this tiny little baby in my hands and thinking, his life's already going to be difficult enough as it is. I can't put this child through the abuse that I am getting every single day. So I took Sophie and I murdered her and I buried her for 15 years. Now imagine what it's like to take something that's so intrinsically a part of who you are. Your sexuality, your gender identity, your religion, a love of music, any of those things, and not just not do it, but deny that it ever existed. Every single day I thought about suicide. Even on days that I thought I was doing all right, I could be driving down the road in a car, and this little voice in the back of my head would go, yeah, but if you did that with the steering wheel, it'd all be over. I put on 7 stone in weight because I was self-harmed with food by this point. And then, in January 2015, of all places to have my epiphany moment, I was in the Hotel Ibis Budget in Bradford. Anyone in from Bradford? A place where many a weary traveller has looked out the window and gone, where did my life go wrong? And this light bulb went off above my head. And it's like, that's why you hate yourself so much. So I went into town, bought some clothes, bought some makeup, and you know what? The pain just stopped. But of course it didn't. What I then had to do was go home and effectively take a hand grenade, throw it into my life, and see what happened next. Now, the football club was pushing for a promotion at the time, and I thought, if I come out now and the players' form dips, I will get the blame. Because that's what football fans do. They will latch onto something to blame. So I thought, I'm going to have to wait. I came out to my family, and I sat down with my kids. I mean, my youngest daughter was 11 at the time, so she knew all about the Kardashians. I still have no idea what they do. And she started asking questions about Caitlyn Jenner. And my wife said, well, do you think we should tell her? And I said, well, go on then. I'm not one to let an opportunity slip through my fingers. It's like, God, yeah, I'm telling her now. And I sat her down, and having me as a parent, my kids weren't brought up with strict gender roles. But they found their own gender roles. And I said to them, well, you know the way you always knew you were a boy, and you always knew you were a girl? Well, it wasn't like that for me. And that caused me a lot of pain. I've always known that I'm a woman. And then my 11-year-old daughter went through all the 5 stages of grief in about 10 minutes. So she did denial, and she did arguing, and she did reasoning, and all the rest of it. And after 10 minutes, we got to acceptance, when she said to me, what's in your makeup bag? A question she has only just stopped asking me 3 years later, because the answer was always the same. I'm 50. It's the same 5 products that were in there last time you looked. But I had to think about what I was going to do with football. And by this point, I was leading a double life. During the week, I was living here in Brighton, and being Sophie, and at weekends I was going back to football and pretending to be Steve. Except that people had noticed that something had changed. First thing that happened is I lost 5 stone in 4 months because I actually started caring about myself for the first time in my life. I got both my ears pierced, which even in the blingy world of professional football got noticed. And I started smiling, and I don't think anyone had ever seen me smile before. Now, one Friday afternoon, I went to see my hairdresser in Hove about getting hair extensions put in. And she said, I can do it now for you if you want. And I went, God, yeah, get them in. About halfway through, I suddenly went, bugger, I've got to take photos of footballers on Monday morning. Can't really pretend to be Steve. They're going to wonder how the fat bald bloke became this vision of loveliness. Why'd you laugh at that? So all afternoon, I'm ringing up my boss at the football club, out of office, not replying to emails, no phone calls, nothing. Saturday afternoon, he rang me back from a family barbecue. And I'm sat in my car on my ex's drive. And she's banging on the window and waving at me. And I'm going, I'm on the phone. She knew I was on hands-free. She could hear every word, as could the entire street. I came out to the entire street at the same time I came out to the football club. And he said to me, what's the matter? I went, I've got to tell you something before Monday morning. I'm really sorry to do this to a family barbecue. He said, what's that? I went, I'm transgender. And he went really quiet. Now, the thing is, I gave one of these talks at the football club about a year later, and he was in the audience. He came up to me afterwards and said, do you remember what I said next? And I went, now, I was sort of freaking out a little bit at that point. He said, because you lost so much weight so quickly, and because it was so urgent you talked to us, we all thought you were dying. So when you told me, I went, oh, is that all? So you go, it's official. Premier League Football Club says it's better to be transgender than dying. And it was arranged for me to go in for a meeting, and we're there in the owner's box overlooking the pitch. And there's the chairman of the football club, there's the commercial director, there's the head of media, there's Eddie Howe, our first team manager, there's Jason Tyndall, our assistant manager, and me in my pencil skirt and heels looking absolutely fabulous. First time they'd ever met Sophie. Pretty sure it's the first time most of them had ever met a trans woman. I think they were all expecting David Williams to walk in and go, I'm a lady. So I like to think I was a little bit classier than that. But the first thing that happened was I actually still had a job, which surprised me. And then our manager, Eddie Howe, turned around to me and said, what can I do to make this easier for you? And the thing is, you can't always expect people to understand straight away, but when your boss says, what can I do to make this easier, that's all you can hope for. And I said, well, I need to meet the players before a match day. The first time they see me can't be as they're running down the pitch. So I arranged for me to go in for a training session, and the boys were off warming up, and Eddie says to me, are you scared? I went, you know what, for the first time in my life, I'm totally at ease with who I am. I said, no, I'm not scared. And they called all the players together in a circle, and our assistant manager said, I suppose you noticed our photographer's changed a bit since last season. Grown her hair out. I'd like you all to meet Sophie. And then our captain, Tommy Elphick, ex-Brighton boy, just started clapping, and the rest of the players joined in. And then Tommy said, right, let's go and train. And I'm like, was that it? I built this up so much in my head. I was expecting rainbows and unicorns and maybe a red arrows fly past. But it's like, well, here's a new piece of information. We've got it now, let's move on. And that's what it was like working in football again. But the thing is, I do still struggle with my demons. I do still have the bad days. But I actually came up with a philosophy for myself about a year or so ago that just kept me safe. And that philosophy was, I know that one day I'll kill myself because I don't know how to stop feeling this way, but it won't be today. And in the meantime, I'm going to do the best that I can to enjoy every single day. And then on the day that I die, in many, many years' time, I'll look back and realize that I didn't get around to doing it. And that's why I've got Not Today tattooed on my wrist. What that did was it allowed me to have those days without feeling guilt and shame. that compounds and magnifies those feelings. The thing is, first of all, I know that I will never do it because I know that suicide isn't the end. All it does is take your pain and give it to someone else. And I can't do that to my kids. And I also know that the feeling will pass because it always does. So just by saying not today, it allows me to live for another day. Now, before I came out, I was terrified. I was terrified that I was going to lose everything. And people were saying, you're so brave. And I wrote this poem to Steve, the person I was before, thanking him for, because he was the brave one. And I posted this on social media. And my then 11-year-old daughter, in 2 sentences, summed up the power of being authentic, the power of being true, and the power of love, much more eloquently than I ever could. And she just put, you're my hero. Steve was great, but Sophie's better. Thank you, everyone.